The night shift at Kensington Palace was always quiet, too quiet. But on this particular evening in late October, something felt different. James Carter, a security officer with 12 years of royal service, couldn't shake the feeling crawling up his spine. He stood near the staff entrance, watching the autumn fog roll across the courtyard. His breath formed small clouds in the cold air. Everything looked normal. But normal didn't explain the strange phone call he'd received an hour earlier. A woman's voice, nervous, whispered, "Check the princess's car tonight. Before anyone else does." And the line went dead. James had tried calling back. Nothing. He told himself it was a prank. Maybe someone's idea of a joke. But something in that woman's tone stayed with him. Fear. Real fear. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel. We share true emotional stories that will move you. Now, let's continue. James looked at his watch. 11:30. The royal family was asleep. The night staff had finished their rounds. This was his chance. He walked toward the private garage where Kate's Range Rover was parked. His footsteps echoed on the stone pathway. The security cameras tracked his movement, but that was fine. He was supposed to be here. He was doing his job. The garage was dimly lit. Shadows stretched across the walls. James approached the black SUV, its polished surface reflecting the overhead lights. He pulled out his flashlight and swept the beam along the exterior. Nothing unusual. He opened the driver's side door. The interior smelled of leather and faint perfume. Kate had driven this car herself just that morning, returning from a school visit in Surrey. James remembered watching her pull in, smiling and waving at staff. He checked the glove compartment. Registration papers. A pair of sunglasses. Nothing strange. He felt under the seats. Still nothing. Maybe it really was just a prank. But then his hand brushed against something. Something that shouldn't be there, tucked deep beneath the passenger seat. Attached to the metal frame with heavy-duty tape was a small black box, no bigger than a deck of cards. James's heart began to pound. He pulled it free, careful not to damage it. The device was lightweight but solid. It had a tiny LED light on one side, blinking red every few seconds. James turned it over in his hands. No labels, no markings. But he knew what he was looking at. A tracking device. Someone had planted a tracking device in the Princess of Wales's personal vehicle. James felt the air leave his lungs. This wasn't a security drill. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had deliberately hidden this device where it wouldn't be found during routine checks. His mind raced. Who had access to this car? When was it last inspected? How long had this device been here? And most importantly, who was watching Kate's every move? James pulled out his phone to call his supervisor. But before he could dial, he heard footsteps behind him. Fast, purposeful. He wasn't alone in the garage anymore. James spun around, his hand instinctively moving to the radio on his belt. A figure emerged from the shadows near the entrance. For a moment, his body tensed, ready to call for backup. Then he recognized her, Sarah Mitchell, one of the palace housekeeping staff. She'd worked here for almost 8 years. Always polite, always professional. But right now, her face was pale and her hands were shaking. "Mr. Carter," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "You found it?"
Out.
James's grip tightened on the small black device. "Sarah? Was that you on the phone?" She nodded quickly, stepping closer, but keeping her distance. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. "I didn't know who else to call. I couldn't go to anyone else. They might be involved." Who's they?" James kept his voice low, but firm. "What's going on?" Sarah wrapped her arms around herself. "I was cleaning the Queen Consort's private study 3 days ago. I wasn't supposed to be there that late, but I'd fallen behind on my duties. The door was slightly open, and I heard voices." She paused, swallowing hard. "I heard her assistant, Mrs. Pemberton, talking to someone on the phone. She was angry, upset. She kept saying something about keeping track of the situation. and making sure we know where she goes." James felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air. Mrs. Pemberton was part of Camilla's inner circle, a trusted aide who'd been with her for nearly 15 years. "First, I thought maybe it was about security," Sarah continued. "But then Mrs. Pemberton said the princess's name, Kate. She said, the device is in place. We'll know her movements at all times." James looked down at the blinking red light in his hand. His stomach turned. "And you heard this 3 days ago?" "Yes. I didn't understand what it meant at first. But then I remembered seeing someone near the garage that morning. One of the private staff from the Queen Consort's household. He was carrying a small bag and looking around nervously. I thought he was just running an errand." "Why didn't you report this immediately?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Because I'm terrified, Mr. Carter. Mrs. Pemberton is powerful. She has connections everywhere in this palace. If I'm wrong, if I misunderstood, I could lose my job, my reputation, everything I've worked for." She wiped her eyes quickly. "But I couldn't stay silent either. Not if the princess is in danger. So I called you. You have a good reputation. People trust you." James ran a hand through his hair. This was bigger than anything he'd handled before. A tracking device. Camilla's staff. Secret surveillance of the Princess of Wales. If this was real, if Sarah had heard correctly, this was a massive breach of trust within the royal household. "Have you told anyone else about this?" he asked. "No one. Just you." James carefully placed the device in an evidence bag he always carried in his jacket. "This needs to go to the head of security immediately. Tonight, but what if he's compromised too?" Sarah's voice rose slightly in panic. "What if they've paid people off? What if reporting this puts the princess in more danger?" James understood her fear. Palace politics could be vicious. Loyalties were complicated. Money and influence bought silence. But he also knew one thing with absolute certainty. "Kate's safety comes first," he said firmly. "Always. That's our duty. That's why we're here." Sarah nodded, but the fear didn't leave her face. James pulled out his phone and photographed the device from multiple angles, documenting exactly where he'd found it. Then he took a photo of the vehicle identification number and the exact location beneath the seat. "Go back to your quarters," he told Sarah gently. "Act normal. Don't discuss this with anyone." "I'll handle it from here," she hesitated. "What are you going to do?" "My job," James said. "The right thing." As Sarah disappeared into the night, James stood alone in the garage, holding evidence of something that could shake the royal family to its core. Someone close to the Queen Consort was spying on the Princess of Wales. The question was why? And more importantly, what were they planning to do with that information? Asterisk, James made his decision. He wouldn't go to the regular chain of command. Not yet. Too many variables. Too many potential leaks. Instead, he would go directly to someone he trusted completely. Commander Helen Price, head of the Royal Protection Command. She'd been James's mentor when he first joined the security service. Tough, fair, and absolutely incorruptible. If anyone could handle this situation properly, it was her. But there was a problem. Commander Price was off duty tonight at her home in Richmond. Contacting her this late would raise questions. He needed to be careful. Smart James left the garage, locking it behind him. He walked across the courtyard, his mind working through every detail. The tracking device was now secured in his jacket pocket. Evidence. Proof. But proof of what exactly? He reached the security office and logged onto the system. Quietly, he pulled up the garage access records for the past week. His eyes scanned down the list of names and times. There, 4 days ago, 6:47 a.m., Marcus Webb, listed as maintenance staff, but James knew that name. Webb worked primarily for the Queen Consort's household. He had no legitimate reason to access the princess's private garage at that hour. James took a screenshot on his personal phone. Then he cleared his search history from the system. He was gathering evidence, but he needed to move carefully. If whoever was behind this discovered he knew, they might destroy evidence. Or worse, his phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. I know what you found. We need to talk alone. The chapel garden. 20 minutes. James stared at the screen. His pulse quickened. Who was this? How did they know? He hadn't told anyone except Sarah, and she had no reason to message him this way, unless someone had been watching him, unless they knew he'd found the device. For a moment, James considered ignoring it, calling Commander Price immediately. But something made him pause. What if this person had more information? What if they could help him understand what was really happening? He typed back, "Who is this?" The response came within seconds. Someone who wants the truth to come out. 20 minutes. Come alone, or I disappear forever. James looked around the security office. Everything seemed normal. The night guard at the front desk was reading his newspaper. The monitors showed empty hallways and quiet courtyards. But somewhere in this palace, someone was watching, waiting. He made his choice. He would meet this person. But he wouldn't be stupid about it. James walked to the equipment room and activated his personal body camera, tucking it discreetly into his uniform. The device would record everything. If something happened to him, there would be proof. He checked his watch. 15 minutes to get to the chapel garden. The walk across the palace grounds felt longer than usual. Every shadow seemed suspicious. Every sound made him turn. The fog had grown thicker, swallowing the lights from the windows. His footsteps crunched on gravel. The chapel garden was located on the eastern side of the palace, surrounded by high hedges. During the day, it was a peaceful place where staff sometimes took their breaks. At night, it was isolated, private, dangerous. James entered through the iron gate. The garden was empty. Stone benches lined the paths. A small fountain stood in the center, its water silent in the cold. He positioned himself near the fountain, where he had a clear view of all entrances. Minutes passed. James's breath formed clouds in the freezing air. His hand rested near his radio, ready to call for backup if needed. Then a figure appeared from behind the hedge. Tall, wearing a dark coat with the hood pulled up. They moved slowly, deliberately. Not threatening, but cautious. James tensed. That's far enough. Identify yourself. The figure stopped about 10 feet away. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then the person reached up and pulled back the hood. James felt his blood run cold. It was Marcus Webb, the maintenance worker. The man who'd accessed Kate's garage 4 days ago. "Mr. Carter?" Marcus said quietly. His face was haggard, exhausted. "Thank God you found that device. I've been waiting for someone to discover it. Someone I could trust." James's hand moved to his radio. "You planted that device." "Yes." Marcus's voice cracked, but not by choice. "You have to believe me. I never wanted any of this." Then start explaining. "Now." Marcus glanced around nervously, as if expecting someone to appear from the shadows. When he spoke, his words came fast, desperate. 6 months ago, I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I was gambling. Lost money I didn't have. Debts piled up. Dangerous people started calling, threatening my family. Took a shaky breath. Then Mrs. Pemberton approached me. Said she could make my problems disappear. All I had to do was a few small favors. "Nothing illegal," she said. "Just keeping an eye on some palace logistics." James felt sick. "She recruited you." "She owns me," Marcus whispered. "She paid off my debts. Every penny. But the price was my loyalty. My soul. And she ordered you to plant that tracking device." Marcus nodded, tears forming in his eyes. "She told me it was for security purposes. That there were threats against the princess, and they needed to monitor her movements for protection. I believed her at first. I wanted to believe her, but then I heard her on the phone last week. She wasn't talking about protection. She was talking about schedules, opportunities, times when the princess would be alone." The words hung in the cold air like poison. James stepped closer. "What is Camilla's staff planning to do to Kate?" Marcus's face crumpled. "I don't know the full plan. They keep everything compartmentalized. But I know it's not about physical harm. It's worse than that. Worse than harm? James struggled to understand. What could be worse? Reputation, image, destroying her credibility. Marcus wiped his eyes roughly. Mrs. Pemberton has been collecting information, tracking Kate's private movements, her meetings, her schedule. They're building a file on her, documenting patterns. James felt rage building in his chest. For what purpose? To leak it to the press. To create scandals where none exist. To make it look like she's hiding something. Marcus's voice dropped to barely a whisper. They're planning to plant false stories. Make it seem like Kate is meeting people she shouldn't, going places that raise questions. They want to damage her reputation slowly, carefully, until the public starts to doubt her. The pieces were falling into place. The tracking device wasn't about physical security. It was about intelligence gathering, about creating a narrative, about weaponizing information. Why? James demanded. Why would Camilla's staff do this? Marcus looked at him like the answer should be obvious. Because Kate is more popular, more loved. The public adores her. And some people in the Queen Consort's circle believe that popularity comes at their expense. They see Kate as a threat to Camilla's legacy. That's insane. That's palace politics. Marcus's laugh was bitter. You've worked here long enough, Mr. Carter. You know how it works. Image is everything. Perception is reality. If they can make the public question Kate, doubt her, they believe it elevates Camilla by comparison. James's mind raced. This was conspiracy. Sabotage from within the royal household itself. If this information got out, it would be a catastrophe. Not just for Kate and Camilla, but for the entire monarchy. Who else is involved? He asked. It can't just be Mrs. Pemberton. There are at least 3 others in the Queen Consort's private office. Maybe more. They meet in secret, use encrypted phones. I've only caught glimpses of their operation. Marcus stepped closer, his voice urgent. But Mr. Carter, you need to understand something. These people are powerful. They have access to resources, to money, to connections in the media. If they find out you know about this, they'll destroy you. They'll make you disappear. Is that a threat? It's a warning. Marcus's eyes were pleading. I'm risking everything, telling you this. They have people everywhere. Security staff, household workers, even some in the media. If they suspect I've talked, my family is at risk. James studied the man's face. He saw genuine fear, genuine regret. Marcus was a man who'd made a terrible choice and was now trapped in a nightmare of his own making. Why come to me now? James asked. Why not just keep your head down and do what they say? Because I have a daughter. Marcus's voice broke. She's 8 years old. She made me watch that video of Kate visiting the children's hospital last month. My daughter looked at me and said, Dad, the princess is so kind. I want to be like her when I grow up. Tears ran down his face now, unchecked. I realized what I'd become. What I was helping these people do? I couldn't look at my daughter anymore without feeling sick. So when you found that device tonight, I saw my chance. A way to make this right. James felt the weight of the situation crushing down on him. One wrong move and this entire thing could explode. But staying silent meant letting a conspiracy continue. Letting these people hurt an innocent woman for their own political gain. What proof do you have? James asked. Beyond your word? Marcus reached into his coat and pulled out a USB drive. Encrypted communications. Photos of documents. Records of payments. Everything I could gather without them noticing. It's not complete, but it's enough to start an investigation. James took the drive carefully. If I use this, they'll know you're the source. I know. Marcus's voice was steady now, resolved. I'm prepared for that. I've already moved my family to a safe location. My wife thinks we're taking an extended vacation. After tonight, I'm disappearing for a while. But I needed someone to have this evidence. Someone who would use it. You could have gone to the police. To the press, the police would bury it. Too sensitive. Too political. And the press? Marcus shook his head. Half of them are in Mrs. Pemberton's pocket already. No, it had to be someone inside palace security. Someone with a reputation for integrity who couldn't be bought or intimidated. James looked at the USB drive in his hand. This tiny piece of plastic contained proof of a conspiracy at the highest levels of the royal household. Evidence that could bring down careers, destroy reputations, and potentially save Kate from months or years of calculated character assassination. "There's one more thing," Marcus said quietly. "Mrs. Pemberton is planning something for next week. I don't know all the details, but I heard her mention a charity event Kate is attending in Manchester. Something about the perfect opportunity and timing is everything." James's stomach turned. "They're going to make their move." "I think so, which means you don't have much time." A sound came from across the garden. Footsteps on gravel? Both men froze. Marcus's face went white with terror. "They followed me," he whispered. "Oh God, they followed me." The footsteps were getting closer. Multiple people. Moving with purpose, James grabbed Marcus's arm. "Run now. Get to your family. What about you?" "I'll handle this." "Go." Marcus hesitated for only a second, then disappeared into the fog. Running toward the far exit, James turned to face whoever was coming. His hand moved to his radio. But before he could call for backup, 3 figures emerged from the mist. Mrs. Pemberton stood in the center, flanked by 2 security officers James didn't recognize. Her face was calm, composed, almost amused. "Mr. Carter," she said pleasantly, "I believe you have something that belongs to me." James kept his expression neutral, but his mind was calculating every option. Mrs. Pemberton was in her 60s, elegant and composed. She'd been part of royal households for decades. Her reputation was spotless. Looking at her now, it was hard to imagine her as the architect of a conspiracy, but James had learned long ago that evil rarely looked the part. "Mrs. Pemberton," he said carefully, "I'm conducting a routine security sweep. Is there something I can help you with?" She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "Please, Mr. Carter, let's not insult each other's intelligence. You found the tracking device. You spoke with Mr. Webb, and now you're standing here with evidence that could cause significant problems." The 2 security officers moved slightly, positioning themselves to block the exits. James recognized their type. Private contractors, not palace staff. Hired muscle disguised in uniforms. "I don't know what you're talking about," James said. Mrs. Pemberton sighed, like a teacher disappointed in a stubborn student. "You're good at your job, Mr. Carter. I've watched you for years. Honest, dedicated. Unfortunately, those qualities make you dangerous in certain situations." "Dangerous to who?" "To the natural order of things." She took a step closer. "You're a working-class man from Manchester. You've served the royal family well. But there are aspects of palace life you don't understand. Political necessities that go beyond simple right and wrong. Like spying on the Princess of Wales. Like managing competing interests within a complex institution." Her voice remained pleasant, conversational. "The princess is young, popular, and powerful. She has the public's love. That's wonderful. But it creates imbalances. It creates tensions that must be carefully managed. By destroying her reputation? By protecting the queen consort's position?" Mrs. Pemberton's mask slipped slightly, revealing something cold beneath. "Camilla has spent decades earning her place. She's suffered public hatred, media mockery, and constant comparison to a ghost. She deserves better than to be overshadowed by a younger woman who smiles for cameras." James felt disgust rise in his throat. "So you decided to tear Kate down." "We decided to level the playing field. To remind the public that popularity isn't the same as substance. The princess presents one face to the world, but people should know the complete picture. Where she goes, who she meets, the truth. There is no truth. You're manufacturing scandals."
Oh.
Mrs. Pemberton shrugged. "Truth is subjective, Mr. Carter. In our world, perception creates reality. A photograph taken at the right moment, from the right angle, can tell any story we want. And the tracking device simply ensures we never miss an opportunity. You're talking about destroying an innocent woman. I'm talking about politics. Her voice hardened. Something you clearly don't have the sophistication to understand. Which brings us to our current situation. You have evidence. A tracking device. Possibly information from Mr. Webb. I need those items returned. That's not going to happen. The two security officers tensed. Their hands moved to their belts. Not police officers. Not bound by law enforcement protocols. Hired to do whatever was necessary, Mrs. Pemberton's expression remained calm. Mr. Carter, please think carefully. You're a good man with a family, a wife. 2 children, if I recall correctly, 8-year-old son, 12-year-old daughter, both doing well in school. The threat was clear, ice cold and deliberate. James's hand moved toward his radio, but one of the officers stepped forward. I wouldn't do that. You're threatening a security officer on palace grounds. James said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. That's a criminal offense. Who will you report it to? Mrs. Pemberton asked. We have friends in security, friends in administration, friends in places you can't imagine. This conversation never happened. You were never in this garden. And if you try to use that evidence, well, unfortunately, your credibility will be questioned. Your background checked more thoroughly. Perhaps some financial irregularities will be discovered. Maybe a drinking problem. The details don't matter. What matters is that no one will believe you. James realized she was right about one thing. This was bigger than he'd imagined. More people were compromised. More resources at their disposal. If he called for backup now, who would respond? Who could he trust? But then he remembered something. The body camera hidden in his uniform. It had been recording this entire conversation. Mrs. Pemberton had just confessed to conspiracy, to tracking the princess, to political manipulation, and she'd threatened his family. All on camera. You're right, James said slowly. I don't have the sophistication for palace politics. I'm just a working-class man from Manchester. But I know one thing with absolute certainty. What's that? My duty is to protect the royal family. All of them. Even from threats that come from within. Mrs. Pemberton's expression darkened. Give me the device and the USB drive, Mr. Carter. This is your last chance.
Ow.
She nodded to the 2 officers. Take them from him. The men moved forward. But James was faster. He pressed the emergency button on his radio, the one that sent an immediate alert to all security personnel. An alarm that couldn't be ignored or intercepted. Officer in distress. Chapel Garden. Immediate assistance required. The 2 officers grabbed him, but James fought back. Not to win, just to buy time. He needed backup to arrive. Needed witnesses. His body camera was still recording everything. One of the men punched him in the stomach. Pain exploded through James's body. He fell to his knees, gasping for air. The other officer reached for the evidence bag in his jacket. Then lights appeared through the fog. Multiple flashlights. Running footsteps. Voices shouting orders. Palace security was responding. Mrs. Pemberton's face twisted with rage. You fool. You have no idea what you've done. I protected the princess, James gasped. That's my job. The other security officers burst into the garden. 6 of them, including Commander Helen Price herself. She must have been called in the moment the emergency alert went out. What the hell's going on here? Commander Price demanded, taking in the scene. Mrs. Pemberton immediately shifted, her mask sliding back into place. Commander, thank goodness you're here. Mr. Carter has been acting erratically. We were concerned about his mental state. But James was already pulling off his uniform jacket, revealing the body camera. He held it up. I have everything on video. Her confession. The threats. All of it. Commander Price's expression hardened. She looked at Mrs. Pemberton, then at the 2 contractors, then back at James. Someone better start talking, she said, and it better be the truth. The next 72 hours moved like a controlled explosion. Commander Price immediately secured the chapel garden as a crime scene. The body camera footage was reviewed. The tracking device was sent for analysis. The USB drive Marcus had provided was handed over to the Royal Protection Command's intelligence unit. Mrs. Pemberton and her two hired contractors were escorted off palace grounds and placed under investigation. She protested, threatened lawsuits, and demanded to speak with the Queen Consort. But the evidence was overwhelming. Her own voice on camera, confessing to conspiracy, to surveillance. Two plans that could have destroyed Kate's reputation. James spent hours being interviewed. His statement was taken multiple times, every detail examined. But Commander Price believed him. More importantly, she believed the evidence. On the third day, James was called to a private meeting, not in the security offices, not in any official building, but in a small, quiet room in a corner of Kensington Palace he'd never been to before. Kate was there. She stood by the window, looking out at the gardens. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back. When James entered, she turned and looked at him directly. Her eyes were grateful, but also sad. Commander Price stood nearby. "Mr. Carter, the princess wanted to thank you personally." Kate walked over and extended her hand. James shook it, feeling completely out of his depth. He'd worked security for the royals for 12 years, but had never been in a private room with any of them before. "Mr. Carter," Kate said softly, "Commander Price has told me everything. What you discovered, what you risked. You saved me from something that could have been devastating. I was just doing my job, ma'am." "No," her voice was firm. "You went far beyond your job. You put yourself and your family at risk to protect me. That's not duty. That's courage." Amis didn't know what to say. He'd spent days wondering if he'd done the right thing. Wondering if the fallout would destroy his career, his reputation, his life. "What's going to happen now?" he asked quietly. Commander Price answered, "The investigation is ongoing. 3 other members of the Queen Consort's staff have been implicated. They've all been suspended pending a formal inquiry. The contractors who threatened you have been arrested for assault and conspiracy. And Mrs. Pemberton, she's been terminated from royal service, permanently. She faced criminal charges for her actions." Commander Price's expression was hard. This kind of internal sabotage will not be tolerated. Kate sat down in one of the chairs, gesturing for James to sit as well. "The difficult part is what comes next. This incident involves the Queen Consort's household. It creates tensions that the family must navigate very carefully." James understood. This wasn't just about security breaches or criminal conspiracies. This was about relationships between family members. Between Charles and his wife, between Camilla and Kate, between duty and personal loyalty. "Has the Queen Consort been informed?" James asked carefully. Kate nodded. "She has," and she was horrified. Genuinely horrified. Whatever her staff believed they were doing in her interest, she had no knowledge of it. No approval. She's been devastated by this betrayal. "Do you believe her?" Kate met his eyes. "Do. Camilla and I have our differences. We always will. But I don't believe she would sanction something like this. Her staff acted on their own, thinking they were protecting her legacy. They were wrong," Commander Price added. "The king has been briefed as well. He's ordered a complete review of household security protocols, background checks, vetting procedures, access controls. This can never happen again." James felt the weight of the past few days settling on him. "What about Marcus Webb? Is he safe?" "Mr. Webb is in protective custody," Commander Price said. "His testimony will be crucial in the criminal proceedings. He made terrible choices, but he also chose to do the right thing in the end. That will be taken into account." Kate stood, walking back to the window. "The thing I keep thinking about is how many people knew, how long this was happening without anyone noticing. Mrs. Pemberton had been tracking my movements for months, building files, planning her campaign, and no one suspected anything. Sometimes the threats come from where we least expect them," James said. "From people we trust," as Kate turned back to him. "Which makes what you did even more remarkable. You could have ignored that phone call. dismissed it as a prank. But you didn't. You investigated. You followed the truth wherever it led, even when it became dangerous. She walked over and stood directly in front of him. My children are safe because of you. My reputation, my ability to do my work, my future. All protected because one security officer decided to do the right thing? James felt emotion rising in his throat. I have a daughter, ma'am. She's 12. She looks up to you. I couldn't let anyone hurt you. Not on my watch. Kate smiled, and for a moment, she looked vulnerable. Human, not a princess. But simply a woman who'd been targeted by people who should have been allies. Thank you, Mr. Carter. Truly. Commander Price stepped forward. There's one more thing. The king has requested that you receive a commendation for your actions. It will be a private ceremony, not public, given the sensitive nature of the situation. But your service will be officially recognized. James didn't care about commendations. He cared that Kate was safe, that the conspiracy had been stopped, that his family was secure. I appreciate that, Commander. But honestly, I just want to get back to work. To do my job? You will, Commander, Price said. But there will be changes. Enhanced security protocols. More oversight. And you'll be involved in implementing them. 3 months later, James stood in the security office, watching the monitors as Kate's car pulled out of the palace grounds. She was heading to a school visit in Oxford. Routine schedule. Normal day. But now, every vehicle was swept multiple times. Every staff member vetted thoroughly. Every access point monitored. The tracking device incident had changed everything, made everyone more vigilant, more aware. Sarah Mitchell, the housekeeper who'd made that first brave phone call, had been quietly promoted. Her courage had been rewarded, though the full story could never be made public. Marcus Webb had pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges, but received a reduced sentence for his cooperation. His family was safe. His debts paid. He'd made terrible mistakes, but he'd also found the courage to make them right. Mrs. Pemberton was awaiting trial. 3 of her associates had already pleaded guilty to various charges. The conspiracy had been dismantled, the threat eliminated. But James knew something that would stay with him forever. Evil doesn't always look dangerous. Sometimes it wears expensive clothes and speaks with cultured accents. Sometimes it works in palaces and claims to serve the crown while serving only itself. His phone buzzed. A text from his daughter. A photo of her at school, wearing a t-shirt from Kate's charity foundation. The message read, Look, Dad. The princess visited our school today and gave these to everyone. She's amazing. James smiled. Kate was safe. The conspiracy had failed. And a 12-year-old girl could still look up to her hero without knowing how close that hero had come to being destroyed. Sometimes, James thought, the most important victories are the ones that never make the news. The threats stop before they manifest. The disasters prevented by ordinary people doing extraordinary things. He looked at the monitors one more time. All quiet, all safe. For now, that was enough. The guard who found the spy device had done his job. And in doing so, he'd protected not just a princess, but the integrity of everything the palace was supposed to represent. Trust, honor, duty. In the end, those values had won. And they always would, as long as people like James Carter were willing to fight for them. Even in the shadows. Even when no one was watching. Especially then,